So I shot the Olympics, the Summer Olympics in Rio for Sports Illustrated. And what I'm hoping to do is just run through how I prepared myself and how I eventually shot the games there. And so, let's kick off. To shoot this photograph on the first morning of the Olympic Games, you first have to do this. Yeah, you got to figure out what you need photographically. You got to figure out how to pack it, and then you got to figure out how to get yourself down to Rio. And for me, that is a nightmare. I don't like packing, and I don't like trying to figure it all out with the gear. And what I tend to do is sort of kind of go back in reverse. I think about exactly what I am shooting, what sports I'm shooting. I knew that I would be doing the sprints in the track and field, so I knew that I needed remote cameras for those finish line sprints. So that's one set of equipment that I needed. I wanted to try out Canon's tilt and shift lenses, so I wanted to take that little set of gear. So that's how I started to build it up. You know, I'm a sports photographer, and as a sports photographer, you need a long lens. I love the 400 2.8, but I knew that first week of the Olympics I was going to be bouncing all around, different venues, 2 or 3 different stadiums a day, and I felt like, you know, I needed something that was going to be a little bit more versatile. So I decided to take the 2 to 400. Love using that lens. It's light, and that's why I was thinking I was going to use that. I also thought I was going to do a portrait at some stage during those 2 weeks. So I packed some gear there that would help me out. Now, the other thing, you might think, well, that's a lot of camera gear, right? It is a lot of camera gear. Not quite as much as here at B&H, but it's a lot for one person. And the reason I have so much gear is because there is no great B&H down in Rio. There are camera stores down there, but they're also very expensive, and they don't have the breadth that somewhere like B&H has. So I wanted to be sort of self-sufficient down there. If I needed something, I knew I had it. So that's part of the reason for having all that gear. Now, you figured out what you need. Now you got to pack it. And it's really important to pack properly, because you don't want to get down to this 2-week-long event and have the gear broken. So I use VersaFlex travel cases, and I use the padding for the camera and lenses. Sometimes I use my Think Tank trolley rolly bag to put inside those cases, and you know, just for added extra protection. And if it's loose at all, I'm packing my clothes around there, so everything fits really snugly. Super important to do. The other points I think are important when you're packing: never overpack those bags, because you might have to lift them yourselves, right? Now, you know, look at these guns, but you know, 50 pounds or 50 kilograms, I can't do it. So you always got to be ready. You might have to lift all those bags on your own, and you don't want to break the handles. And the other important point with packing, because it is really important, is that TSA are 100% going to go through your bags. So if you've packed it so it's all intricate and complicated, the guy at TSA just unzips it, and he's just piling through it, looking for that one thing he saw in the X-ray. And then he doesn't put it back with the care that you have obviously packed. So again, pack simply, don't overpack those bags. So you're ready to go. You packed it, now you got to travel. Now, I was flying to Rio via Sao Paulo. One of our guests here today is from Sao Paulo, so he knows exactly what I had to go through. My flight, I reckon, was going to take 15 hours. But you all here have had your vagaries with airlines, right? It's never as simple as they advertise in those plush first-class seats. And guess what? This is my text. This is my smartphone with the text messages explaining my flight. 15 hours delayed. So when you're thinking about all this, you've got to think about preparing for the worst and hoping for the best. Always a nightmare. But I made it down there. I did have an overnight stop in Sao Paulo. I did have to carry those bags on my own. So again, forward thinking really helps you when you're dealing with a lot of gear and you're traveling with it. There was a famous Brazilian singer, and he said, Rio is not for beginners. And he's right. It's a tough town if you don't know your way around there. I always build in a few days extra to get myself acclimatized and get myself situated. I had 2 or 3 days lined up for that. No thanks to United Airlines. So I'm on the ground, and there's a part of the reason you want to build in that time for yourself is because, one, you need to figure out the media bus schedule. Now that's really important because that's getting you to the venues and probably more importantly, getting you back to your hotel so you can take a snooze. And it's complicated and chaotic, particularly at the beginning of the games. So it's important to sort of try and get that organized. The other place which is important is the main press center. And main press center, you've got the photo chief. They dish out tickets. You can work there, and there's a lot of colleagues of yours there. So again, another important place to get used to. Canon Professional Services are also there. And they're great because they provide clean and check. They lend you gear. But one thing I found pretty important with Canon Professional Services, they had these TV screens in the back that were showing photographers getting their equipment stolen. Now, that was a great wake-up call for me because I wasn't here in the States where everything is pretty nice, you trust the other guys, you're in a different country, there's a pretty high crime rate in Rio. And I was lucky enough to be there 2 years beforehand, and a lot of guys got their gear stolen. Now, I don't think it was random acts of theft. It was organized gangs who were stealing. And just an example of that, at the Soccer World Cup, these gangs had figured out where the media were parking. And one of those old tricks, they'd be watching, and they would see the photographers leave, and then they would come down, let the air out of their tire, wait for you guys to come back, and then follow you. So you're on the way back to the hotel after the game, you realize you have a flat tire, you pull over, and lo and behold, they pull up next to you and relieve you of all your camera gear. That's not a random act of theft, right? So it was a great reminder for me that I needed to be aware at all times where, you know, this stuff's not cheap, right? So being aware of where your camera gear was super important. These were the lockers that were at every venue. Now, if you got close enough and sneezed, the door would open. So, you know, you had to make sure you weren't leaving anything of value in those overnight. And those first few days I was there, I knew that my first assignment was going to be shooting the opening ceremony from outside of the stadium. And Sports Illustrated wanted me to shoot from a favela looking towards the stadium. Now, they provided me with a fixer. Now, a fixer is somebody who knows the lay of the land, knows how to keep you out of harm's way, and knows the right people to talk to, which is very important. I don't know my way around Rio that much. So the first few days, we scouted out locations, we wandered around, and of course, one benefit of having a fixer, he also knows where the best bars are. Do you know what that is? Cachaça. Yeah, exactly. Sugar cane alcohol, pretty potent. Huh? Woo! Pretty potent stuff. Main ingredient of the caipirinha, by the way. Don't ever have more than 3. But, oops, easy. So opening night, I was in the favela early. I was traveling light, 2 camera bodies, short lenses, and a mini pod. And I was just wandering around, photographing people watching in the bars, watching in their homes. And, you know, I'd already scouted out the position on the roof where I'd overlook the favela and then the fireworks in the distance. And this is where I used that mini pod, because I was using slow shutter speed, trying to balance the ambient light with the bright lights of the fireworks. Shot on a 16 to 35, slow shutter speed. I think it was around about 20th of a second. So high ISO. But I got to tell you, I don't like shooting the opening ceremonies of any event. And the reason is because it puts you on the back foot straight away. Because I went to bed at 2:30, and then I got up at 5:30 in the morning to go to my first event. Now, it's okay if you're doing it one time, but for 2 weeks, you really have to manage your rest. And it's not just because I'm an old geezer, it's because you do. It's like the Olympics feels like it's 24 hours, 7 days a week. And you could feel like you could work that time. But guys who do, after about the second or third day, they begin to fall by the wayside. And it takes them 2 or 3 days to get better to go back out and shooting. So important to manage your rest. The other thing that's important is to figure out where you're going to get your information from and how you're going to view it. Obviously, most people have a smartphone. I had a schedule here that I'd found, very bare bones, but it would inform me of what was going on each day without being complicated. My assignments from Sports Illustrated were emailed to me, would be in like 2 or 3 days before the actual event, so I'd know roughly what was coming. And I was going to be going to like 2 or 3 different venues each day. So first day, this is what I was traveling with. I had the 2 to 400 on monopod, and then I had another body and a short lens, and then a backpack with lots of little short lenses in. And that was me. I wanted to be light, flexible, I wanted to be able to get round. And as I said, the rowing, there was no gold medal races that day, so I went to the start, and I spent the morning there. I didn't have any particular assignment. I was just looking for different images. This is what I-95 looks like in the Olympic rowing, right? Early morning practice before the event starts, shot with a 2 to 400. Again, just looking for different images or interesting images is what I was after. Shot with a 16 to 35. And again, I love the guy here, holding the boat. It was like a little old school there as they start. This is the women's US 8s in the prelims. And one thing that really did take me by surprise was the weather. I wasn't really ready for that sort of gray, overcast, rainy sky. But it was what it was, and you had to deal with that. Again, just looking for interesting compositions using that 2 to 400 lens. Guys, there aren't many of you here, so if you have any questions or you want to ask me something that I'm not explaining that well, feel free to jump in anytime. So that was my first morning, and then I went to the handball. It was obviously an inside venue. I shot this with a 70 to 200, and each venue has their own personality, and you have to figure it out. And I was doing it as I was going. I hadn't visited them beforehand in those few days before the start. And so there's a different photo chief, there's a different set of rules where you're allowed to photograph. You have to figure out the bus schedule to get to those venues. So there's lots of sort of moving parts for you to get there before you even start taking a photograph. I went from the handball, I went to the beach volleyball. The position was on Copacabana Beach. Iconic spot in Rio, and I was looking to sort of incorporate that with my photograph. Shot with an 8 to 15 millimeter lens, and I'm trying to balance the stadium lights with the ambient setting sun there. And that was really the beginning of my week. I was bouncing around venue to venue, maybe 2 or 3 times a day. The tennis, Serena Williams was a story at the beginning. Slow shutter speed, 15th of a second, 2 to 400. That lens really came into its own for me. Judo, again, these are sports that I'm not photographing every day here in the States, but I get to photograph every 4 years. So I'm trying to figure them out as much as trying to figure out the bus schedule, you know, what is going on the field of play, you know, where are the goals in judo? You know, I didn't know where they were. This is me arriving late at the kayaking, and look, how many friendly faces do you see there? None, right? Look at them, they're looking at me going, you haven't got a hell's chance, mate, in getting in here. There's no space for you. Which was, you know, great, thanks guys. Thanks for looking after me there. But, sorry?
What kind of lens were you using then?
Well, I had that 2:4, you know, and that gave me that, you know, flexibility. So I did find a spot. No thanks to these ugly mugs here, but you know, I did. I got in there, I found a spot, and you know, the kayaking was heavily backlit, but the 2:4 again came into its own. I was shooting with high speed, shutter speed to freeze the water droplets there, but also trying to think about that background, you know, because it was very backlit. I went from the kayaking to the rugby sevens. Really exciting sport to photograph. Short and quick. And here I am, 16 to 35, just trying to set the scene really of that venue as the sun sets. But really the action was what I was trying to photograph. And I was using the 2:400. Yeah. 2:4. It's not the. Yeah, it's a zoom lens they have. Canon have a zoom lens, 2:4, with the inbuilt converter. But you know, for me, I was using the Canon 1DX Mark II. Okay, so that ability to use those high ISOs enabled me to use those high shutter speeds to freeze the action. And you know, having that confidence that you can, you know, go ahead and use those high ISOs is really important, particularly for a sports guy. Very important, in fact.
How do you get your colors so good? The white balance?
I'm using auto white balance most of the time. Yeah, most of the time's auto white balance. I mean, these have a little post-production on them, these images. Not a ton, but you know.
Pretty good for a high ISO.
Yeah, this is, I mean, I don't actually know what it is, but it's up there, 4,000 or 5,000 ISO. Because I'm using that, you know, it's either a F4 or F5.6 I'm using with that 2:400. So, went to the gymnastics. Simone Biles was obviously a big story that first week. You know, shooting low at the gymnastics, they had these awful white sort of bars everywhere down low. So I was like, I'm not going down low, I'm moving up, I'm gonna go up high. And I shot Simone Biles here with that 2:400 up high looking down on the beam. Again, fencing. I mean, these are sports, I can't tell you enough, these are not sports that I'm doing every day. So I have to sort of figure out, hey, what's going on here? Who's the main guy? Unless Sports Illustrated are telling me, hey, we need Joe Smith, I'm like going there to make just a lovely image, which is obviously a big luxury. I'm not working for a newspaper, so I have a lot of luxury working for Sports Illustrated, looking for just beautiful images. The great thing about fencing, obviously, there's a contrast. The athletes are wearing white, and there's most of the time is a black background. And again, I'm using that 2:400 to try and help me out and flatten up the images there. This is not my hotel room. I know you guys think it was smaller than that little box, my hotel room. But this is the SI Tech, Jordan Murphy, and he's helping me find the VLAN connection. And the way I transmitted down there, the way Sports Illustrated wanted to work, I had to use VLAN. And that is Virtual Local Area Network. Wow, I actually did my homework and it paid off. I remembered it. That's about all I could do. I knew how to plug the Ethernet cord into the side of the camera, and I knew what settings to do, and I knew how to press, and I would send either raw files, transmit raw files that way back to the office, or I would send whole takes back to the office. It was very quick, and when it worked, and it worked 90% of the time, it was great. If it went wrong, I just called the SI Tech, because I had no clue what to do to fix it.
Does the camera have LAN port?
Yeah, it does. It has an Ethernet port. The 1DX Mark II has an Ethernet port, and that's how I was connecting in there. And Most of the big agencies, in fact, all the big agencies, AP, Getty, Reuters, they all used the VLAN. And there were color-coded Ethernet cables at almost every stadium. So ours was purple, and you can see them here. These were the VLAN cords. And you'd come in and you'd plug your camera in, and you could transmit. I can't think of anybody else who was transmitting raw files. We were transmitting raw files. They were being edited in Rio by the photo staff, or back here in New York, where the office is for Sports Illustrated. As I said, wandering around Maracanã Stadium, and little did I know, Neymar scoring a penalty against Costa Rica in the daylight, right? Little did I know what that meant for later on. But again, just wandering around that stadium, using that 2 to 400, just looking for different and interesting images as I went round. This is how I was feeling most of the time during that latter part of the week. Definitely tired. But, you know, I still had the juices to keep going. Still managing that rest, which is important, obviously. Now, I said to you about, I took those tilt shift lenses with me. So every venue I went to in that first week, I was using those tilt shift lenses, just trying to use that great effect they have. I'm certainly no expert with the tilt and shift lenses, but the way I photograph with them, and I had the range. I had the 17 mil all the way to the 90 mil lenses. So I would look at the venue, I would go, well, you know, I think it might make from here, or I might try it from here, and also trying to shoot some action. So I went to, you know, every venue: tennis, kayaking, gymnastics. You know, so I was everywhere I was going. I was trying it to see if I could put together a little series of images with the tilt shift lenses. I like to shoot them wide open, whatever they are, 2.8 or f4. That's how I like to use them. That accentuates that effect of the depth of field. So that's why I had them. That's why I was using them. I'm not an architectural photographer. I'm not trying to straighten any lines, just trying to create a really lovely effect. And also the one other thing, there are no real tight action photographs here. Canon have yet to make a 300 tilt shift lens. Who knows if it's in the works, but you know. So I did try the action with the tilt shift. Now, I don't know if any of you guys have used it. Anybody use the tilt shift? No? Well, it's tough. You have to manually focus. There's no autofocus with a tilt shift, right? So that's the first problem. Because nowadays, I'm just pressing that back button, following it around. Now I have to manually focus it, and I'm dealing with that oblique depth of field there. And that's, well, for me, it was impossible. And that's why I'm not showing you any nice action photographs with that. I totally blew that. But I went to the field hockey, beach volleyball, and it gives a great effect to use it. I really love using it. Went to the fencing, and again, just looking to make it work, really. That's what I was after. Anybody know this guy? Yeah, Usain Bolt, right? And that was my main focus towards the end of the week. I knew I was going to be doing the track and field, and I knew that he was going to be a very big story. And so I went to the stadium early, I scouted around, spoke to the photo venue chief there, you know, figured out the ins and outs, figured out where the position I was going to be working from, looked at the other positions. You know, it was definitely a good scouting day for me. I wasn't the only photographer thinking along these lines. There are other guys exactly the same as me, thinking about how they're going to maximize and get the best photograph of the biggest event at the Olympic Games. These photographers are putting up their finish line, their head-on finish line remote cameras for the sprints. And as you can see, a lot of remotes means, you know, lots of equipment, you know? So if you're going to do remote cameras, you've got to take double what you're doing. Now, I love remote cameras because they get you to positions that you're not meant to be in, and they get you great angles. And it's also become pretty simple to use a remote camera. You put the pocket wizard on the top of the camera, you stick the camera down where you think you're going to make a photograph, and hey presto, what could be easier than that? Well, the problem is with photographers is that you begin to forget the one thing you do control is the camera in your hand. Because you spend a lot of time putting these remote cameras up. You're worried about the focus. Did they get knocked? Is the channel going to work for me? lots and lots of different problems that you start encountering when you're putting remotes up. This was going to be my position, okay? It was going to be infield, and this here, these were, I put four, these are mine, 4 remote cameras up, okay? Now, I made it a little bit more complicated. I didn't use the radios because there's lots of radio waves in that stadium, not just from other photographers, as you're pointing out, but like powerful TV radio waves. And they can really disrupt those pocket wizards. As much as Pocket Wizard says they're piece of guaranteed, they are guaranteed if it's just you in some farm patch in middle of wherever, some college ground. So anyway, going back to, I hardwired my cameras, okay? So you use zip line, and it's a little bit more complicated, but it's more guaranteed. It's not 100% guaranteed, they never are. You still got to turn them on, right? Human error always plays a part. So I hardwired them, and I had a foot pedal, and I would press the foot pedal, and I had my handheld. Yeah, I mean, trust me, that's difficult for me. I mean, I got such a small brain to do 2 things at the same time. That's difficult for me. But as I said, this was my position. These were my remotes, and this was all leading up to the 100-meter sprints. This was important. The story was important. And this gives you a better idea of where my remote cameras were. They're there. I would be shooting with my handheld around about here. Now, I didn't really like that infield position, to be honest with you. You know, the background, it wasn't great. They had these waterproof coverings for the media seating. They reflected all the lights. It looked a little rough. But, you know, I kind of convinced myself after the women's 100 meters, it was a good race, it was close. Thompson, the Jamaican girl, won it. And she made a good photograph for me. She's looking straight at me. I like to think she's looking straight at me. She wasn't. She's looking at the scoreboard. She's looking at timing. But that's where I was positioned. So she made a good photograph for me, and I was like, well, you know, I started to convince myself everything would be great. You can see I just followed it around a little bit more. And this is what I was talking about. Look at that. It's bloody awful. But there wasn't much I could do about that. So I convinced myself I was going to be good, you know, it's going to be great. And, you know, there are 3,000 photographers credited to the Olympics. 2,999 are at the 100 meters, okay? That's the big event. They are there. And so you get this angst built up, you get this worry, this nervous energy within yourself, because this is where you want to make that great photograph of the finish of the 100 meters, the blue ribbon event. Now, there are several factors involved making a great photograph, right? The ones that you control, they're great, they're easy, right? You turn the camera on, that's a start, so that's going to give you a good chance of getting a good photograph. There are some that you don't have control of, like, is it going to be a close race? Are they going to be put in the right lanes to make it an interesting race? Those are the things that you don't have control over, and you're just kind of like keeping your fingers crossed. So all these things are going through my mind as the 100 meters, you know, gets going, gets close to starting, and this is it. This is Bolt winning the 100 meters, and look, he looks like he's out in Central Park walking his bloody dog. He doesn't look like he's straining across the line at a very close 100 meters, making a great photograph for me. That's a problem.
And what type of lens were you using?
I was using, my handheld was a 70 to 200 millimeter lens. 70 to 200.
What was you standing?
Sorry?
Where were you standing?
I was standing infield where I showed you earlier. I can just give you a quick run back here. I was standing roughly where this dude was. That was me. Yeah, right there. But as you can see, look at him. He's like he's winning this race so easily. As I said, out strolling in Central Park. So this was my handheld camera, 70 to 200 millimeter lens. And this was my first remote. And you know, it's okay. It's okay, but he is not exactly exuberant. He's looking up at the scoreboard and can see how far ahead he is of everybody else. This is my second remote, same lens, 24-70 I used. I had two with the same lenses on, just different focus points and different focal lengths. So one's wider than the other.
Is it in a natural light or this was?
It's all natural light, yeah. I'm exposing, I've pre-focused. What you saw that guy doing when he was standing on the finish line, they're pre-focusing. You have to pre-focus your cameras to where you think the action's gonna come. Now, you know, obviously it's important because you get, those guys move up and down those lanes. Wherever they qualify is where they go. And lanes, I want to guess lanes 4, 5, and those are the guys who qualified the fastest. Now that doesn't necessarily mean the winner's going to come from those lenses, from those lanes. But you know, as I said to you, lane 5, this is Gatlin who came second. Lane 5, the guy is still in the start blocks. I think he's still there now. That's how bloody slow he was. So it made a big difference for me in creating this photograph. Look, there's a massive gap there. It's not that interesting. So that's what I'm talking about. You don't have control of those things. You know, I just didn't control where they went. And I didn't control how close it was. Completely out of my powers. As much as I'd love to be able to control it, that's what you come down to when you're photographing the Olympics 100 meters. So I followed him around with that 70 to 200. And again, you know, he's not really celebrating hard, but you know, it's the finish line. It is what it is kind of thing. Here he's celebrating to the crowd. I mean, he's a phenomenal athlete. 3 separate 100-meter gold medals. I mean, wow, phenomenal, right? I mean, he's also incredibly laid back. Here, he's on his victory lap, and he's doing a selfie with the heptathlon medalists. And he's doing a selfie with them. He's so laid back. I've worked with him one-on-one, and you know, nothing seems to bother him or faze him. So I got to photograph him as the week unfolded. He got to obviously run in the 200 meters. This is qualifying in that race. It was in the morning, so very different light. Obviously, the 200 meters is a longer race. I used a slow shutter speed there to try and give that blur effect in the back. I shot 90th of a second, and I was shooting with that 70 to 200 lens and just panning him as he took off from the start blocks there. This is the finish of the 200 meters, and I shot this time from outside in the moat area where the majority of photographers are working from. Different background and certainly a different feel from when you are shooting infield. And just to go full circle, this is Bolt qualifying in the 100 meters and shot with a 2 to 400 millimeter lens. And one thing to bear in mind is that he is so good. When you're doing the qualifying, you don't want to be at the finish line, because when he crosses the finishing line in qualifying, he's probably reading a book or doing the crossword puzzle or picking his nose. You want to be further down the track, closer to the start blocks, because that's where he looks like a sprinter, just like this. So that was my sort of 100 meters. Not great, to be honest with you. I can't say I got an iconic image from it. So slight change of pace. I had to shoot a portrait. Now, Katie Ledecky, Michael Phelps, and Simone Biles with their medals. You know, I had the easiest job. I just had to press the shutter. That's all I had to do. The tough part came trying to get those 3 people, those 3 superstars, together at the same time in the SI office. That was the tough part. And I got to say, I had no part of doing that. That was the writers, that was the photo editors, that was the editors of the magazine working to get those guys all together at the same time. Biles, she was not happy. She was still competing. She'd been in drug testing that night, so she was tired. And here she had to come and pose for me and give me a nice big smile. Tough to do for an athlete. This is not such a high ISO. I was using lights here. I had strobe lighting. It was a studio setup, and it was dedicated to me. It wasn't in one of the stadiums. They came to the SI office. We made like a makeshift studio there, and they were coming to me as the photographer. So it's a low ISO because I was controlling everything, and that's what you do with portraits. you generally are controlling everything, including the image that you're trying to take. Yeah. It wasn't hours, let's put it like that. It was literally, hey, are you ready? Quick, let's get out of here. They have so many other commitments, and they are scheduled by their agents up the wazoo. So they come in, they want to do what you need, and then they're out of there. It did end up making the cover of Sports Illustrated. Obviously, you can see they put a different background on that image. And it's an important point you make. You don't get a lot of time, and you've got to keep their attention and get them to be looking at you, concentrating on you through the camera. This was not some intimate, lovely little studio I had. I had all these guys behind me making a lot of noise, a lot of distraction, and generally mucking about. So you've got to keep the subject super focused on you. I did get a little bit of time with Biles, and I photographed her. She had won 3 gold medals at that stage. So I did a nice little detail of her. This is me trying to direct Michael Phelps. They used it on their Instagram. And I've worked with Michael Phelps a lot, and I've never seen him more happy than during this time. Not because he was seeing me, but he was like, he knew he'd finished, he knew he was retiring, he knew he'd had a great Olympics, and he was in an amazing mood. So then it was back to the track and field again. Portrait, and then woo, straight back to what I was doing. This is the triple jump. This is the women's triple jump, shot with a remote camera, the 8 to 15 millimeter lens, and I'm looking to sort of, play with the shape of the stadium there, and I'm looking to expose it as a silhouette. Mo Farah kissing the finish line of the 10,000 meters. He won the double. And again, slightly elevated finish line position, shot with that 2 to 400 lens. Van Niekerk, he smashed the world record. When he broke the world record, he was in lane 7. Anybody who knows anything about track and field, if you're on the outside, you got a little further to run, I think, right? It's still 400 meters, but I mean, it's like crazy that he smashed the record from that lane 7. Again, 2 to 400, and that ability to use that Mark II camera with the high ISOs and have that confidence I can do it means that I can freeze the action there. So working infield, I have a bit of a love-hate relationship with it. There are only 16 photographers who are allowed to work infield during the track and field. That's the rules of the IAAF. As I said, a little bit of a love-hate relationship. Great freedom to walk around. That's why I can get close to the action. But the downsides are getting skewered by a javelin, hit on the head by a hammer, and getting the discus in the back of your neck. Those things can really ruin your day. So there's a lot going on the infield, and you have to have your wits about you running around there. The detail here is the women's shot put. Again, using that 2 to 400 with the converter, just trying to get the chalk as she chalks up the hands and the shot. This is Adrian Dennis from AFP showing why you need to have a beer belly to stabilize your 400-2.8. I don't think B&H sell the beer belly, but it could be a new prototype. Not yet?
Next quarter.
Back onto the track and field, looking for different angles. The steeplechase, this is not obviously the regular angle. I was looking for the reflections. And again, 16 to 35 lens, and I shot it early in the race because once they hit the water, it breaks up that sort of clear look, exposing for those the silhouette of the runners there. This is the classic position. These guys are in it, quite a number of them, and you're looking to photograph them as they come over the obstacle there into the water jump. Now you can see, this is the boom arm of TV. Now, there's definitely a love-hate relationship, or definitely a hate relationship with photographers and TV. TV at the Olympics, they kind of paid a lot of money. They feel they own it. And you as a photographer have to kind of play nice with these guys. They come in at the last minute, as they have done here, and that ruins your photograph, trust me. But you've got to play nice with the TV. A lot of the cameramen are very pleasant towards photographers, but the director who's not on the floor, who's in the TV truck, is screaming at them to get in front of the photographers. So always a sort of cat and mouse game you're playing with those guys. Now, I don't know if you remember that photograph I took at the beginning with all the equipment. Can you guess what I forgot to take with me? Yeah, a rain jacket. Didn't take a rain jacket down to Rio. I was thinking it was going to be like, beach weather, blue sky, very hot, but pouring with rain at the track and field. Luckily enough, I had protective covers for my lenses, but myself, no cover. No pneumonia, though. I was good.
It's a great shot.
Thank you. Thank you. The long jump, and again, that ability as an infield photographer, I snuck in close to the sand pit where they were jumping. It's not a remote, shot with a 16 to 35 lens. And as you can see, these are the guys' remotes here. And those are probably being fired by outside photographers who are in that moat. This would be the moat. You can see one guy there. Somebody did send me one of their remote pictures. That's me. I'm in his remote picture. But as the infield photographer, I kind of have the right of way. It's very important that you're aware of those guys in the moat, because they have a job to do just as much as I do. And I try to accommodate them as much as possible. Again, Adrian Dennis on the starting ladder for the 100 meters. And after you do day in, day out of the same sport, you begin to get a little stir crazy. And he definitely had lost the plot at this stage. Again, that 1DX Mark II. The great thing for me with that camera was the ability to shoot with no buffer. No buffer. Raw file, no buffer, The old 1DX had a buffer if I was shooting raw files of like between, I don't know, depending on the ISO, 14 to 18 frames. With this camera, 170 frame buffer with raw files.
So in the past, were you shooting JPEG?
No, I was shooting raw files. I had to deal with that problem of the buffer.
Okay.
And that was,
I don't know if they know why I'm asking that question.
Why? Oh, yeah.
I don't know if they know why I'm asking that question.
Well, explain.
Because if you're shooting raw, you've got to worry about the buffer filling up and then
right.
you shot.
Yeah.
So in the old days, you used to shoot straight JPEG and make sure all of your aesthetics were pretty close, and then you just shot.
Yeah.
With this camera, you don't have to do that.
Yeah, that's exactly. The deal was with the older camera, if you had a great sequence happening in front of you and it ran more than the buffer would allow, it would stop. It was a problem for me as a sports photographer. But this 1DX Mark II, there is no buffer now when I'm shooting raw files. Okay, when you're shooting raw files, it's slightly different than the JPEGs. Okay, you get a bigger buffer with those JPEGs. So using that, so that's the main reason I use that camera. I also mentioned earlier about that confidence with the high ISOs. And as a sports photographer, you need the you need those high ISOs so you can get those high shutter speeds to freeze the action. Of course, that is not high shutter speed. Very slow shutter speed, 1/8 of a second, and I'm just looking to pan with the long distance runners. They go round and round and round and round, so you get plenty of time to play if you're up for doing that. Now, one thing I did this Olympics I hadn't ever done before is play with the robotic cameras, the robotic remote cameras that Sports Illustrated had put in. They had put 5 remote cameras, robotic remote cameras, in 5 different venues at the Olympics. And in the office was where the console was, where you fired them from. So several miles away from where the actual cameras were. And so one morning I got to play with it. I got a quick lesson. This is the joystick here and the shutter on the top. And these were the screens: wrestling, badminton, water polo, rhythmic gymnastics. They had 5 different things. So I sat in there, I got that quick lesson, and then decided which sport I was going to photograph. Sounds pretty straightforward. But being in that office, there was lots of people walking by me all the time saying, "Hey, Simon, hey, how's the family? What's going on?" You've got to concentrate. I mean, the key thing with a sports photographer is having the ability to concentrate. Really important. But these people walking by all the time talking to me and me trying to figure it out, it was tough. It was difficult. I did a morning of it. I'm not sure I could have done a whole day. But here's some of the images. Rhythmic gymnastics. Wrestling, used on the Instagram account. But you know, you're getting images. I mean, these robotic cameras, they move, focus, exposure, everything. You just have to have the subtlety to use that joystick. So at every Olympics, you tend to have an Olympic moment. I was lucky enough, I think, to have 2 Olympic moments. This was the first. I got to go to the gold medal match between Germany and Brazil and the soccer final at the iconic Maracanã Stadium. And you know, I knew that South America, they're really into their soccer. And this was the line of photographers just to get onto the pitch to get your position. So you had to be there early. The atmosphere was unbelievable. It was incredible. And Neymar, he scored the winning penalty in extra time to win the gold medal for Brazil. Huge deal, right? Huge deal in Brazil. Massive. Atmosphere was unbelievable. This was shot on a 2-400 after he took the penalty and started celebrating. But, you know, definitely an amazing feeling to be there for that. My other Olympic moment came at the wrestling, which was pretty much the last event I shot. The guy in red is from Mongolia. The guy in green and blue is from Uzbekistan. And this was the bronze medal match. This was it. Not the gold medal match, the bronze medal match, right? But that's the great thing about Olympics. They're all important. Every game, every match has that Olympic flavor to it. Anyway, I'm not a great, I don't have a great knowledge of wrestling, but the guy in red from Mongolia was winning with about 10 seconds to go. And just before the end, he wouldn't engage. So the referee, as the bell went, the referee gave him a penalty. He thinks he's won. So he starts celebrating. His coaches, they're like, they've lost the plot already. They're celebrating. You know, it's a huge deal for Mongolia. Everybody's super happy. But the Uzbekistani guys realize that maybe they've won it. Now, as a photographer, it's all going on. You don't know which way to point your lens. You know, is it over here? Or, you know, you're kind of all over the place. Anyway, I start to realize that the Uzbekistani guy is winning. You know, he is going to get the bronze medal, and he starts to go mad. The Mongolian guy, now he realizes he's gone from winning to suddenly losing and getting a medal. 4th place, no medals, right? The coaches, they start taking their clothes off and throwing them at the judges. And it's like, wow, it's all going on. You know, and I say, I'm kind of like all over. I love this picture because the guy's got the little, see him, he's got, hey mate, I think it's a little too late, right? He's down to his tidy-whities. I mean, come on, dude. And the officials couldn't figure out what to do with these guys. And it was, you know, I got to tell you, it was kind of funny and sad all in one moment. And that kind of summed it up. That's the Olympics right there. It's an amazing event with these highs and these incredible lows. This just happened all together to the same person. So by the end of the Olympics, you know, I've mangled a few more words of Portuguese. I've kind of figured out that, you know, I figured out the bus schedule a little better. You know, I've had 1 or 2 too many caipirinhas, but you're tired and it's time, you know, it's time to go home, man. I mean, you are beat. You've made a lot of friends, a lot of colleagues along the way who have been in the trenches with you. And here I'm at the weightlifting, very blurry photograph. Everybody's happy to go home. And so that's it. You get on the plane, you're out of there. That's it. Olympics done. It goes so fast. And before you know it, you're back home and you're going to an NFL game. So that's the end of my Olympic talk. Wait. 2 weeks later, I went back down there for the Paralympics. So I had to pack again, sort it all out. make sure I had the right gear. But this time, of course, I had all the knowledge, right? I had all the knowledge about those venues, kind of knew where I was going. And here I am packing, and then I'm back shooting. Paralympics, very different feel to the Olympics. Low key, same venues, but definitely a lot more low key.
What's the media coverage like?
It was good. A lot of photographers there. Surprising a number of photographers who were at the Paralympics. I'm dealing with lots of different things. There's more room for photographers because there isn't the 3,000 that are accredited to the Olympics. But there's lots of different categories, which I wasn't really. This is my first Paralympics. A lot of different categories. Blind long jumping. Now, when we finish here, try walking up this row here with your eyes closed. Can you imagine having to run and jump with no sight? These guys are unbelievable. Really amazing. And just as much joy to win a gold medal at the Paralympics as there is in the main Olympics. But definitely a very different vibe. And I would say, it was my first Paralympics, and I was definitely into it and photographing it, and it was exciting to photograph. So that is the end of my talk. All right, guys. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
I'm going to let you back into the cold and grim.
Whether you're a hobbyist or a professional, B&H has the answers to your questions. Experience a world of technology at our New York City Superstore. Connect with us online or give us a call. Our staff of experts is happy to help.